For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On one pre-dawn morning, 27-year-old Colton Merriweather left for a training run in the Blue Ridge foothills. He never returned. Despite an extensive search across the rugged pasture land outside a shuttered apple farm, involving Deputy Rhea Donnelly and tracking dog handler Ivy Ko, Colton Merriweather vanished without a trace. His GPS watch's last ping near a private lane only deepened the mystery. For 7 years, his family lived with agonizing uncertainty, clinging to fragmented hopes. Then, following a property sale, an unexpected discovery was made beneath a derelict barn. A stone cistern, dry and forgotten, held a chilling secret, exposed by a corroded race bib safety pin. This is the complete investigation into what happened to Colton Merriweather. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. Colton Merriweather, at 27 years old, embodied the spirit of the ultrarunner. His existence was defined by endurance, by pushing physical limits against the backdrop of challenging landscapes. The rugged Blue Ridge foothills, with their deceptive climbs and dense, ancient forests, were his sanctuary and his proving ground. Here, amidst the quiet majesty of nature, he honed his formidable athleticism, preparing for races that demanded not just speed, but an unwavering will to overcome. His routine was a precise, almost meditative ritual. Before dawn would break over the eastern peaks, Colton would embark on his training loop, a path he knew intimately. This familiar route wound through the lower elevations, skirted the edges of sprawling pasture land, and occasionally ventured higher onto the ridge. On this particular morning, the air held a premonition of change. As he ascended, the sky, initially clear, began to darken with an unnatural speed, an ominous shift from the predicted forecast. Sudden and severe storms rolled in, transforming the familiar terrain into a treacherous environment. The wind whipped through the trees, visibility plummeted as heavy rain lashed down, turning the trail into a slick, perilous path. For even an experienced runner like Colton, these conditions presented a significant hazard. It was amidst this meteorological chaos that his digital footprint abruptly ceased. His GPS watch, a vital tool for tracking his progress and ensuring his safety, stopped transmitting its signal. The last known coordinates placed him precariously close to a private lane, a seldom-used track winding away from the main thoroughfare, far from any established trail. When Colton failed to return home hours later, the initial concern swiftly escalated into profound alarm. Calls were made, first to friends and fellow runners, then to local authorities, marking the official commencement of a search that would stretch on for years. Family and friends, bolstered by local responders and volunteers, immediately converged on the area around his last known GPS coordinates. They meticulously scoured the immediate vicinity, their frantic shouts echoing through the rain-soaked woods and across the open fields. However, the exhaustive initial efforts yielded nothing. Colton Merriweather, a man who lived by precision and preparation, had vanished without a single, discernible clue, leaving behind a community bewildered by the unsettling mystery of his disappearance. His absence created an immediate void, a palpable silence where his vibrant presence had once been. Deputy Rhea Donnelly, an officer known for her methodical approach and quiet tenacity, officially assumed command of the investigation into Colton Merriweather's disappearance. The initial, frantic volunteer efforts, while vital, now required the structured, systematic approach of law enforcement. Search parameters were immediately expanded, moving beyond the immediate vicinity of Colton's last known GPS signal. Teams fanned out across the vast Blue Ridge foothills, meticulously combing the dense forests, treacherous ravines, and the sprawling pasture land that abutted the wilderness. Particular attention was paid to the area around a shuttered apple farm, an isolated property that lay within the broader search grid. To aid in the arduous task, specialized units were deployed. Tracking dog handler Ivy Ko arrived with her highly trained K9 unit, their keen senses deployed to pick up any trace of Colton's scent. The dogs worked tirelessly, navigating the difficult terrain, but even their expert noses struggled against the overwhelming scent of the recent storms and the sheer immensity of the search area. The rugged landscape presented formidable challenges for every searcher. Steep inclines, hidden rock formations, and thick undergrowth made progress slow and arduous. The aftermath of the severe storms compounded these difficulties. Swollen creeks, slick surfaces, and fallen branches further impeded movement, making every step a potential hazard. Visibility remained poor in many areas, even after the rain subsided due to the dense forest canopy. Despite the intensive efforts, the most frustrating aspect of the early investigation was the absolute lack of tangible evidence. There were no signs of struggle, no discarded items of Colton's distinctive ultra-running gear, no footprint impressions beyond those of the searchers themselves. No witnesses emerged to offer any insight into his movements after the storms rolled in. The private lane near his last known signal offered no further clues, merely fading into disuse. Initial theories revolved around the most probable explanations for a solo runner caught in severe weather. Getting lost, a fall, or an accident due to the treacherous conditions. However, without any physical evidence, these hypotheses remained speculative. As days turned into a week, the initial urgency gave way to a growing despair. The extensive search, involving hundreds of personnel and countless hours, had yielded nothing. Colton Merriweather remained an enigma, his whereabouts a complete mystery, and the hope that had fueled the early efforts began to wane, leaving only questions and a deepening sense of dread. The initial weeks of intensive searching for Colton Merriweather bled into months, then into a year, and then into many more. The vast Blue Ridge foothills, once alive with the urgent calls of search parties, slowly returned to their natural silence. Each sunrise brought no new answers. Each sunset only deepened the mystery. The case, despite the tireless efforts of Deputy Rhea Donnelly and her team, began its inexorable slide into dormancy. No new leads emerged, no credible witnesses came forward, and the physical environment had long since relinquished any immediate secrets it might have held. Colton Merriweather simply remained gone. For Colton's family and closest friends, time did not heal, it merely stretched the wound. The absence of a body of any definitive explanation meant there was no closure, only a persistent, gnawing uncertainty. Birthdays passed, holidays were celebrated with a chair perpetually empty, and milestones in the lives of his peers served as stark reminders of the future Colton was denied. They lived under a lingering shadow, haunted by the what-ifs, and the agonizing realization that their vibrant son, brother and friend had vanished without a trace into the wilderness he loved. Deputy Donnelly, however, refused to allow the case to be completely forgotten. Though active search efforts dwindled, her commitment remained unwavering. Periodically, she would pull Colton's file from the cold case cabinet, rereading every report, re-examining every map, hoping a fresh perspective or a newly acquired piece of knowledge might illuminate a forgotten detail. She revisited the perimeter of the initial search grid, particularly the isolated stretches of pasture land, and the silent, shuttered apple farm that lay within the general vicinity of Colton's last known signal. The farm, with its decaying barn and overgrown orchards, stood as an unchanging landmark in a mystery that refused to yield. As the years accumulated, the initial flurry of media attention naturally dissipated. Colton Merriweather's story, once a headline, receded from public consciousness, becoming another unsolved local enigma. The posters bearing his image, once ubiquitous, faded and peeled from notice boards, eventually removed by the elements or civic cleanup efforts. Yet for those intimately connected to the case, the passage of time only amplified the torment. 7 years had now passed since Colton Merriweather embarked on his pre-dawn run. 7 years of unanswered questions, 7 years of silent grief, and 7 years during which a dark secret had remained buried, waiting for an unexpected catalyst to bring it to light. The Blue Ridge, usually a source of solace, now held a chilling silence, guarding its secrets with an impenetrable resolve. 7 years had passed, a period during which hope had calcified into a quiet despair. The Blue Ridge had held its secrets tightly, offering no solace to those who grieved Colton Merriweather's absence. Then, without warning, a small, unassuming object emerged from the shadows of neglect, a silent herald of change. It was a race bib safety pin, a common enough item in the world of ultrarunning, yet its context made it extraordinary. The pin was discovered corroded deeply into a weathered wooden lintel, high above the main entryway of the decaying barn at the shuttered apple farm. This property, previously a peripheral point of interest in the vast search grid, now abruptly shifted to the center of a reawakened mystery. The significance of this minute piece of metal could not be overstated. Ultrarunners, including Colton, routinely attached their race bibs to their shirts or shorts using such pins. The advanced state of corrosion indicated it had been lodged there for a considerable duration, likely since the time of Colton's disappearance. For 7 years, this tiny, metallic fragment had remained unnoticed, blending into the aged wood, a silent testament to a presence that had been overlooked in the initial, broader searches. Its discovery provided the first tangible, physical link between Colton Merriweather and a specific structure on the landscape, moving the narrative beyond the abstract wilderness. The barn, a structure often passed over in the focus on open fields and dense woods, had silently held a crucial piece of the puzzle. This seemingly minor find sent a ripple of renewed urgency through the cold case. It was not an answer, but it was undeniably a clue, the first in years, a beacon in the prolonged darkness. Deputy Rhea Donnelly, who had carried the weight of Colton's unsolved disappearance for so long, felt a resurgence of her methodical determination. The safety pin, though small, represented a crack in the impenetrable wall of silence that had surrounded the case. Her focus, once diffused across a vast geographic area, now narrowed with laser precision onto the barn and its immediate surroundings. The initial searches had focused on the open areas and trails, making the interior of a derelict barn a less obvious point of intense scrutiny. Now, that oversight seemed glaring. The shuttered apple farm, once merely a landmark of unfulfilled searching, was instantly transformed into the primary scene of a reignited investigation, its every crevice and shadow now subject to intense scrutiny. The long, frustrating stasis of the past 7 years had been shattered by a single, corroded safety pin, forcing a complete reevaluation of the entire investigation. The corroded safety pin, a minuscule artifact from a past life, dramatically recalibrated the entire investigation into Colton Merriweather's disappearance. The vast, sprawling search for a lost runner across the Blue Ridge foothills now condensed into a meticulous, granular examination of a single, decaying structure. The barn at the shuttered apple farm. Deputy Rhea Donnelly, her resolve renewed by this unexpected breakthrough, directed a comprehensive refocusing of all available resources. Teams, once spread thin over miles of rugged terrain, now converged on the farm property, establishing a strict perimeter. Every plank, every beam, and every inch of the barn's dusty interior and the surrounding grounds became subject to an unprecedented level of scrutiny. The floorboards were checked for instability, the walls for hidden compartments, and the accumulated hay and debris were systematically removed and sifted. Outside, the earth around the barn's foundation was probed, looking for any signs of recent disturbance or buried objects that might have been overlooked in the initial, less focused sweeps. The objective was no longer merely to find Colton, but to understand what had brought his race bib pin to this specific, isolated location. Deputy Donnelly's efforts extended to re-interviewing individuals associated with the property, most notably Wes Talbot, the long-standing farmhand. His previous statements, given when Colton was presumed lost to the elements, now held new, critical weight. Donnelly pressed him on details about the barn's history, its structural integrity, any unusual activity, or any unfamiliar visitors in the years leading up to and immediately following Colton's disappearance. Every mundane detail from Talbot's memory was now viewed through the lens of potential foul play. Forensic teams, equipped with modern techniques unavailable or deemed unnecessary 7 years prior, painstakingly sifted through the accumulated dust and debris within the barn. They searched for fibers, blood traces, or any organic material that could link Colton to the structure or identify another presence. The precise location of the corroded safety pin, high on the lintel, served as a grim anchor, drawing a tightly defined perimeter around the barn itself. The vastness of the Blue Ridge was momentarily forgotten, replaced by the claustrophobic focus on this single structure, now understood to be the key to unlocking the 7-year mystery. The pressure to finally uncover the truth, to bring closure to a family that had endured unimaginable agony, became an almost physical burden, pushing the investigation relentlessly forward into the barn's silent depths. The small, corroded safety pin had narrowed the search, but it was an entirely unforeseen event, a mundane transaction of commerce that would finally shatter the 7-year silence. The shuttered apple farm, a property that had stood largely untouched for decades, was put up for sale. This change in ownership initiated a series of activities on the land, bringing new eyes and a fresh perspective to every corner of the neglected estate. Contractors and real estate agents, unfamiliar with the history of Colton Merriweather's disappearance, began the routine inspection and preparation of the property for its new custodians. It was during these preliminary assessments of the aging barn, the very structure where the safety pin had been found, that a shocking discovery was made. As workers began to clear the accumulated layers of old hay and debris from the barn's dirt floor, they noticed an irregularity. Beneath a particularly thick layer of compacted straw, they uncovered what appeared to be a roughly hewn stone slab, unlike the surrounding earth. Further investigation revealed it was a lid, concealing an opening. With considerable effort, the slab was moved, exposing a deep, dark cavity beneath the barn floor. It was a stone cistern, a structure designed to collect rainwater, yet this one was entirely dry. Its runoff system had been deliberately diverted years prior, rendering it useless for its original purpose. Within the dry, cavernous space, illuminated for the first time in years, lay the grim truth. At the bottom of the cistern, among a scattering of leaves and sediment, was Colton Merriweather's ultra-running pack, precisely as he might have carried it 7 years earlier. The discovery of the pack, in such an improbable location, immediately signaled the end of the long search. However, the most chilling detail was not merely the presence of the pack, but the definitive evidence surrounding the cistern's opening. Forensic examination quickly confirmed that the heavy stone lid had not simply fallen into place or been casually set aside. It had been deliberately mortared shut from above, sealing the cistern with a methodical, calculated effort. This crucial detail transformed the entire narrative of Colton Merriweather's disappearance. It was no longer a tragic accident, nor the inexplicable vanishing of a lost runner. The evidence of a mortared lid pointed unequivocally to a deliberate act of concealment, shifting the case from a missing person investigation to a probable homicide. A dark secret, buried deep beneath the Blue Ridge soil, had finally been exhumed. The discovery of Colton Merriweather's pack at the bottom of the dry cistern had provided the first irrefutable proof of his fate in 7 long years. Within hours, forensic teams descended into the dark cavity, their work methodical and grim. There, beneath the layers of sediment and forgotten debris, they confirmed the full extent of the tragedy. Colton Merriweather's remains were found, bringing a definitive, albeit horrific, end to the prolonged search. The identification process, while necessary, was swift, confirming the identity of the ultrarunner who had vanished into the Blue Ridge foothills. His family, after years of agonizing uncertainty, finally received the definitive answer they had desperately sought, a truth more brutal than any imagined accident. The evidence surrounding the cistern's lid was immediately paramount. The methodical application of mortar, sealing the heavy stone slab from above, unequivocally pointed away fr. An accidental fall or a self-inflicted demise. This was not a natural occurrence. It was a deliberate act of concealment, an intentional effort to ensure Colton Merriweather would never be found. The investigation instantly pivoted from a missing person case to a probable homicide. The immediate focus shifted to understanding not just how Colton came to be in the cistern, but who had placed him there and then meticulously sealed his tomb. Deputy Rhea Donnelly, who had carried the weight of the unsolved mystery for so long, now spearheaded a homicide inquiry, driven by the stark implications of the mortared lid. For Colton's family, the revelation brought a complex, agonizing mix of emotions. There was a profound, almost primal relief in finally knowing, in having a definitive answer to the gnawing question of his whereabouts. Yet this fragile closure was immediately overshadowed by a new, searing pain. The knowledge that Colton had not simply been lost to the elements, but had been deliberately trapped, his fate sealed by another human hand. Their grief now carried the heavy burden of injustice. The Blue Ridge community, having lived with the ghost of Colton's disappearance for so long, reacted with shock and a somber recognition of the dark secret that had festered beneath their feet. The case of Colton Merriweather became a testament to the relentless pursuit of truth, however long it might take. It highlighted the unexpected turns cold cases can take, sparked by a corroded safety pin and the mundane transaction of a property sale. Deputy Donnelly's unwavering persistence, even in the face of years of silence, had ultimately been vindicated. The truth, however tragic and painful, had finally surfaced, brought to light from the silent depths of a hidden cistern, ensuring that Colton Merriweather, after 7 years in the dark, could finally rest. The pursuit of justice for his deliberate concealment had only just begun.